There is a weight to your story that no other generation can claim. Not because you talk about it, but because you learned early how to carry it quietly. You are the children of the post-war generation. The baby boomers, raised by men and women who survived the Great Depression, fought in a world war, and came home without the language to describe what they had seen. They taught you strength before they taught you vocabulary. They modeled endurance before they ever modeled vulnerability. You did not enter the world gently. You were born into a demographic earthquake. 76 million children arriving within less than 2 decades, reshaping schools, neighborhoods, churches, highways, and expectations. But your story does not begin with statistics. It begins with parents who had already stared at collapse and decided, without ceremony, to rebuild. The adults who raised you were not experimenting with identity. They were restoring order. They had known hunger. They had known ration books and telegrams. They had known the sound of uncertainty echoing through empty kitchens. And when peace arrived, they did not romanticize it. They structured it. They built subdivisions, poured concrete, planted flags, and created systems sturdy enough to stand between you and a world that had once fallen apart. You grew up inside that structure, inside the unspoken agreement that safety was not assumed. It was manufactured. That strength meant showing up, that feelings existed, but responsibility came first. And for a long time, the world made sense. The rules matched reality. If you worked hard, you progressed. If you behaved, you were trusted. If you endured, you were respected. Character revealed itself over time, not through declarations. Then the language shifted. Now restraint is mistaken for distance. Silence is interpreted as absence. Strength is measured by visibility instead of reliability. And when you do not rush to narrate your inner world, people assume you do not have one. But you do. You were never trained to perform your emotions. You were trained to carry them, to keep moving when things felt heavy, to do what needed to be done and process it later, if at all. So when this modern world asks you to constantly expose, to soften publicly, to translate every internal tremor into words, it can feel like being evaluated by rules you never agreed to follow. This is not nostalgia. It is not resistance. It is the quiet disorientation of realizing you were built for a world that demanded resilience. And now you live in one that rarely recognizes it unless it fractures. You did not simply enter America. You arrived all at once. Classrooms overflowed. Teachers struggled to keep pace. Entire suburbs materialized to hold your numbers. But when you are born into something that large, you learn early how to compress yourself. Attention was finite. Space had to be shared. So you adapted not by demanding more, but by asking for less. You waited your turn. You learned that cooperation mattered, that noise had consequences, that blending in could be wiser than standing out. If this moved you, comment 9 right now. If it didn't, comment 0. Your voice matters. Take 1 second and share it. Reliability became more valuable than spectacle. Contribution more important than recognition. That instinct stayed with you. Even now, when the world tells you to amplify, to brand, to assert uniqueness at all costs, part of you still remembers the original lesson. Survival is collective. Order is fragile. The whole matters more than the individual spotlight. Your parents did not grow up talking about feelings. They grew up suppressing them. Softness in their world was a liability. So when peace finally came, they expressed love practically, through mortgages paid on time, through refrigerators that stayed full, through discipline that prevented chaos. They did not ask how you felt very often. They told you what to do, not because they were cold, but because control felt like safety, predictability felt like protection, structure felt like love. You learned to read expectations without them being spelled out. You learned to regulate yourself, to correct your behavior without negotiation. Stability was the inheritance they handed you, not emotional fluency, but order. From the outside, your childhood looks mythically free. No cell phones, no hovering parents. You left the house in the morning and came back when the streetlights turned on. But you were not unsupervised. You were surrounded. Every porch had eyes. Every block had guardians. Mrs. Henderson down the street. Mr. Carter watering his lawn. The store owner who knew your parents before he knew you. Freedom did not mean anonymity. It meant accountability. If you crossed a line, someone corrected you immediately. Authority was shared. Respect was structural. Your reputation followed you. You learned to be consistent in every room, to regulate yourself without surveillance. To understand that character was public. The playground was iron and asphalt, hot metal and unforgiving surfaces. If you fell, you hit the ground. No one labeled it traumatic. No one rushed in to narrate your feelings. You checked for blood, wiped it off, and decided whether to get back in line. Pain was not a crisis. It was information. You learned calibration. How high was too high? How fast was too fast? How to grip tighter? When to let go? Each fall taught you something permanent. You could take impact and continue. Strength was not the absence of pain. It was the refusal to let pain dictate your next move. Failure arrived early and without cushioning. You did not make the team. You lost the race. You heard no when you hoped for yes. And the world did not stop to reframe it. There was no meeting, no adult negotiation. The moment stood exactly as it was. Uncomfortable, undeniable. So you sat with it. Embarrassment burned. You replayed it quietly. You recalculated. And by morning, life moved on. The sun rose. Your friends still showed up. You survived being seen at your worst. That realization formed something durable inside you. Failure was data, not identity, but it also taught you to process pain privately. Then came the sound of culture shifting. Elvis, the Beatles, music that unsettled adults. You watched authority loosen its grip in real time. You saw that change does not ask permission. It erupts, loud and disorienting. You learned to adapt without dramatizing, to absorb transformation without worshiping it. So when people accuse you of resisting change, they misunderstand. You met change early. You survived it without applause. And always, somewhere in the background, was the possibility of annihilation. Duck and cover drills. Calm voices instructing you to crouch beneath desks that would not save you from anything real. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Televised fear. 13 days suspended between routine and potential extinction. You went to school anyway. You did your homework. You ate dinner. You went to bed wondering if morning would come. When it did, something in you hardened quietly. You understood that adults were afraid too. That order is performed in the face of chaos. That safety is never guaranteed. Then assassinations. A president. A civil rights leader. Another Kennedy. Hope interrupted in black and white. You watched adults lose composure. You saw grief ripple through living rooms. This was not distant history. It was conditioning. You learned that leaders fall. That justice is fragile. That hope bleeds. And still, people marched, voted, continued. You absorbed a deeper lesson. Hope is not certainty. It is persistence. Everything shaped something solid in you. You learned endurance, adaptation, reliability. You learned how to function under pressure without demanding reassurance. But strength practiced without release carries weight. You learned how to hold it together, not always how to let it down. You learned how to survive, not always how to say, "This is heavy." So you carried it. Now the world speaks fluently about emotion, about therapy, about trauma, and sometimes the language feels foreign. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Opening up feels unnatural. Slowing down feels indulgent. Asking for help feels like failing at something you have always managed alone. But this is not accusation. It is invitation. You do not have to prove endurance anymore. You do not have to earn rest. You do not have to carry every weight simply because you always have. The resilience that shaped you does not disappear when you set something down. It evolves. Strength that once meant holding the line can now mean choosing where to stand. Endurance can mature into discernment. Silence can soften into deliberate speech. You were built in an era that demanded steadiness. That steadiness is still inside you. But now, perhaps for the first time, you are allowed to pair it with reflection, not to rewrite your history, but to understand it, and maybe, just maybe, to finally let some of the weight rest beside you instead of always on your shoulders. If this reflection felt personal, it's because your story still matters. Your resilience shaped a nation, even when it went unnoticed. If this message resonated, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who lived through it beside you, and subscribe for more thoughtful explorations of the generations that built the world we stand in today.